Good morning, and welcome to this episode of the History of the World, and today we're talking about Hellenization. Now, the word Hellenization is actually a modern expression for the spread of Greek culture through the means of immigration, trade, and war in the ancient world. Let's begin in the years around 500 to 300 BC. This was the Greek golden age of art, religion, and philosophy. This was centered around the city of Athens, although at this time Greece was still a city-state nation, and each city strived for dominance over the others. Beyond Greece, the Greeks were xenophobic and considered the surrounding peoples barbarians. Even the nearby state of Macedonia, although culturally Greek, was not fully accepted as civilized, and across the eastern Mediterranean was the mass of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, who the Greeks would view as their great enemy, and opposition to them in the Persian Wars would solidify the Greeks into a greater Greek identity beyond the city-state and form a new sort of nationalism. The Persian Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BC, he then vastly expanded, conquering the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which is modern-day Iraq, and further assimilating Babylonian culture and continuing the long tradition of acceptance of their gods and their religion alongside the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism. And it's good God and it's evil God in a duality. This empire ruled over vassal kingdoms, and preserving the institutions and the ruling classes of these conquered lands, the Persian king was able to maintain a peaceful hegemony. This style of co-opting support for local rulers would be executed later by the Roman Empire. The Persians expanded to modern-day Pakistan in the east and the borders of Greece in the west. This expansion was stifled in the west by the Greeks in the Persian Wars. Like the Greeks, the Persian rulers saw themselves as civilized, and their expansion was brought by the beliefs that they were civilizing the tribal peoples they conquered. Now let's get back to the slave-owning, misogynistic, and self-important Greeks. In 430 BC, the power struggle between the democratic Athens and the totalitarian Spartans erupted into a 30-year conflict called the Peloponnese War, which devastated Athens and the Greek colonies, and leaving Sparta the short-lived victor. And the exhaustion of this war would effectively cripple Greece, and, as we know at this time, to the north, Macedonia was on the rise. Because of this war exhaustion, Philip of Macedon subdued most of Greece under his sovereignty, and in this confidence, inspired by his Greek campaigns, he turned his attentions toward the east and to Persia, but his dream was cut short and never brought to fruition because he was assassinated. The murder, unsolved to this day, but likely orchestrated by his son and successor, Alexander the Great, or, as he should be known, Alexander the Destroyer. Alexander took the experience of his father's army and the experience of his father's campaigns in Greece and asserted himself in the Balkans, and then he turned his army east after his power was secure. He then liberated Anatolia and Egypt from the Persians. The Egyptians, massaging his vanity, would confirm him as a god. He then defeated the Persian king Darius III and conquered Babylon and the Persian Empire, pushing it into India in a 10-year campaign, ending with his untimely death by fever or possible poison in Babylon, with an unclear successor of his new territories in the east. The extent of Alexander's new empire will be divided between his generals, most notably Ptolemy, who gained control of Egypt, and Seleucus in Persia and Mesopotamia, to form the Seleucid Greeks and the Seleucid Kingdom. These new independent kingdoms in the east would be ruled by the descendants of these generals for 300 years, until the defeat of the Greek Ptolemy queen, Cleopatra, and she would be defeated at the hands of the Roman Octavian Caesar. The effect of the Greek kingdoms was the spread of Greek culture throughout the East and Egypt, the increase in the trade and spread of Greek language, as Greek was used in state functions, and in Egypt the Ptolemies would refuse to speak Egyptian, seeing the locals as inferior. Cleopatra was actually the first Ptolemy queen to be able to speak both Greek and Egyptian. In this period, you can see the abandonment of total xenophobia and an attempt at cultural fusion between these new kingdoms and Greece. This can be seen clearly as the Egyptian gods are now dressed in Greek styles. Further to the east, in what is now present-day Afghanistan, a kingdom called the Greco-Bactrians, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, emerged, who held contacts with India, China, and the East, and they brought statues of gods and Greek gods to the East and influenced the local Eastern religions, and this resulted in the statue tradition of the Buddha, and the original and older statues of the Buddha will be seen in a Greek style, wearing togas. These Hellenistic kingdoms existed until they are ousted in the East by the rising Parthenons, who are trying to resurrect the Persian Empire, and in the Mediterranean by the Romans and the generals Scipio Africanus in modern-day Turkey, and Pompey Magnus conquering the Levant, and finally Octavian Caesar bringing Egypt as a Roman tax-paying province. The legacy of Alexander and the Hellenistic kingdoms was the spread of information through the Greek language and through trade. The cult of Alexander's campaigns would then go on to echo through history, inspiring conquerors such as Pompey Magnus, Julius Caesar, and Napoleon Bonaparte. Thanks for listening.